If you were 2-7, you'd be in a bad mood too.
Whoa, he has trouble with the snap, and the ball is free. And he hits the upright again. That's impossible.
Get your mouth shut. Get your mouth shut. Jerk.
The Bears' season's going to end on a double doink.
If Worms had machine guns, then birds wouldn't be scared of them.
Hey, how's everyone doing out there? Welcome to Word Hole Media presentation of the Limp Ditkas podcast. I'm Pete.
I'm Ryan. Welcome to the Limp Ditkas podcast, the special holiday edition. We're just a couple of Chicago pricks united by our mutual hatred of the Chicago Bears and University of Michigan football. This week, we are going to be talking about the college football playoff final selections. We might as well call that the Power 5 Invitational tournament. Got a little bit of NFL news, just talking about your Dallas Cowboys and some hilarious shit with my Detroit Lions. We might as well jump into it. The college football playoff has been set. The 4 teams that made it are not very surprising at all.
In fact, we called it exactly last week. We said if Notre Dame loses, it'll be what it is.
Yeah.
We said it. Notre Dame loss is not as costly as a Clemson loss.
Right. Yeah, Clemson would have been completely out having 2 losses to Notre Dame, but instead they moved to number 2 behind Alabama, of course. Then number 3, a little bit controversially, would be Ohio State, and we can get into that a bit. I think it's justified, but a lot of people do not. And I'm certainly not a Ohio State fan, but they did what they had in front of them and went undefeated doing it. So, and then of course your Notre Dame Fighting Irish finished number 4, which there was I don't know. Were you a little bit nervous when they announced the Final Four on Sunday?
No, not really. I mean,
ESPN did everything they could to play up that drama. Like if Texas A&M could have gotten in, or Florida maybe had a chance since they played so well against Alabama. But
I mean, I wasn't surprised because I think from a TV revenue standpoint, Notre Dame Alabama brings way more in than Texas A&M and Alabama.
Sure does.
Let's cut to the chase, right?
Yeah. Well, you just cut through all the bullshit right there. That's why it happened. So
and that's one reason why it happened. You could argue that maybe Texas A&M deserved it a little more than Notre Dame, but I mean, at the end of the day, here's the problem with any argument. The number of ranked teams that people played was all about the same. And what do the rankings even mean? Guess what? Ohio State only played 6 games, but guess what? They played 2 ranked teams, Indiana and Northwestern. They beat Northwestern 3 times. And Texas A&M played 2 ranked teams and only beat one of them. They lost. They lost to Alabama.
That's where your win against North Carolina, I think just sets any argument aside.
And the prior win against Clemson.
Well, definitely Clemson. But since you lost to them, it's that's what I'm saying. It's kind of a push between you and Texas A&M there. But then your additional win over North Carolina, they were good before you played them. You kind of handled them. You struggled in the first half and totally handled them defensively, especially in the second, and were by far the superior team. They kept on going right after that. I forget who they beat down the stretch, but they were not a fluke. I think they went up in the rankings by the end of the season after you played them. So that I think that North Carolina win is literally what put you over the top, 4 versus 5 right there over Texas A&M. Texas A&M can argue all they want, but they needed to beat Alabama, and they did not. They got their ass kicked by Alabama. So
and every coach from every conference can bitch about the Big Ten being there with Ohio State, but I mean, you could totally theorize based on who was left on their Big Ten schedule that they would have been 8-0 anyway. I mean, they would have beat Michigan. Please. Michigan State beat Michigan. So, like the road that was laid out in front of them of the games that they did not get to play was not enough of a challenge. They did luckily get to play the challenge games. They got
Yeah.
to play the challenge games, and to me, that was more than enough to earn them a right this season to be in the playoffs.
The one thing you could say is they did struggle, especially in the first half against Northwestern on Saturday in the Big Ten championship game. But you got to remember, I think they were missing 22 players due to COVID, so that was not necessarily the A team of
Right.
Ohio State. So I mean, there's
No,
just
right.
so many different arguments. So
That was when I really became impressed with them, because I thought for sure Michigan State definitely had a legitimate chance in the game with the amount of players that they had out, and then they just handled them in the second half like it was
Northwestern,
I mean, yeah, I mean, wait, they had 22 players out again this weekend?
yeah,
Oh, I didn't realize that.
yeah, they've got COVID all over the place, but they just keep playing somehow. So
Huh.
good for them.
But they also had a bunch of COVID cases for the Michigan State game,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I'm saying. They've had
Yeah.
it all year. They've had different things going on. They just somehow keep playing
I
where
mean,
other
they could. That being said, they could very well be the best team in college football.
Yeah,
The fact that
exactly.
they haven't skipped a beat. I mean, the worst thing that happened to Alabama is they lost Saban. Whoop-de-doo. So
The best part of this whole thing is one of the biggest detractors to Ohio State, and you mentioned this last week, was that Dabo Sweeney, Clemson's coach, was saying they shouldn't be involved. And in fact, he voted in the coaches poll, he voted Ohio State at number 11 this
wow.
week. So just trying to slap them in the face as much as you can before they play each other on New Year's Day.
Yeah,
Number
you
2
want
versus
to talk
number
about
3.
give a team a lot of incentive.
Yeah,
Jeez.
it's not like you need that bulletin board material and all that. I think it
Yeah,
is bullshit.
right.
It's more fun to talk about than being a real factor in any game. I mean, if a college kid's not motivated to play in a national semifinal game, he shouldn't be playing football at all. So, but it's just funny. It's fun to talk about, fun fodder for podcasters like us.
Speaking of Dabo Sweeney,
Yeah,
or Dabo,
it's
potato,
Dabo.
potato. It is Dabo? We're
Yes,
confirmed?
it's Dabo.
What about if you're from the south side of Chicago? Then it's Dabo, right?
I think that's if you're British.
Dabo, mate.
Dabo.
Dabo, mate. I just want to talk about the game for a minute. It was an
Yeah,
interesting
let's do that.
football game, and I'm gonna Joey Lawrence. I'm sorry, I mean Trevor Lawrence was the definitely the difference in the game, and I'm going to tell you why. The play and Notre Dame's inability in the 3 first possession opportunities to be up 21-0.
Yeah.
And only walking away with 3 points. That's problem 1.
That's a problem.
Problem 2 was stemmed off of problem 1. But what was interesting is Clemson ran the same exact play they scored the first touchdown on in game 1, but their backup quarterback was unable to throw the pass accurately to the wide open receiver, where Lawrence hit him in stride for the touchdown. And I just laughed on that play because I'm like, I totally remember the same play in the first half of the first time they played. And then I thought to myself, how over the past, 9 weeks or whatever, did Notre Dame not have
adjust.
that on their radar, that when X formation was occurring, that this could be a play, so we should probably have someone back over the top. Now, all that being said, they could have audible to that because they saw blitzes coming and knew they were going to be in man coverage. So, and that was what the play was, and that was the same play they called last time. So I'm jumping ahead, but
maybe you'll be prepared by the national championship game if you guys both make it. So
yeah, maybe. But I'm optimistic that they'll show up a little bit more than they have in the past against Alabama. But
yeah, let's talk about your upcoming game.
Well, I mean, basically, the game against Alabama, because I mean, from what I've seen, it looks like Alabama's a better football team than Clemson. From what I've seen this year,
offensively, I'm not so sure defensively, especially.
Yeah, and that's something to note. I mean, Clemson was a different team defensively than Notre Dame played the first time. And, they only had one additional player on the field that they didn't have last time, which was their middle linebacker. So I don't think that was all the difference, but they definitely had a good game plan after Notre Dame marched down the field 3 straight possessions and only walked away with 3 points. I mean, I knew at that point, I did not feel good about the game. On the flip side of that, before we get into the Alabama Notre Dame game, Notre Dame's defense made adjustments at halftime and held Clemson to 10 second half points, and we only could come up with 7. So
yeah,
the Notre Dame defense adjusted, did their job to allow the team back in the game. But the Clemson defense just had the Notre Dame's offense number that, last weekend. So, it is what it is.
a lot of it could be chalked up to, and I heard some pundits talk about this, like how Notre Dame wasn't quite ready for the physicality and the athleticism of a Clemson team right off the bat. And you could see that adjustment was made in the second half where they kind of got slapped in the face and it woke them up finally, but it was way too late by then. So on the positive side, you got your ass kicked by Clemson, but maybe that gets you ready for similar, perhaps better competition, even with Alabama. Like you're ready for it, where it's not just a total shock at how athletic and fast and physical the game is. So that's one thing you can take going into it. I mean, that experience. I mean, it's tough. It sucks, but you still made the playoff. So, I mean, you could take all the positives you want from it if you'd like. Yeah. So,
I mean, I'll take the big positive that I'm glad it happened then. And we still have yet to figure out what's going to happen a few weeks from now. So,
and actually,
So
happened last week where it means almost nothing because all you did is move from number 2 to number 4. So,
right. Which was that was the whole thing we discussed. We're like, Notre Dame's in no matter what. And everyone said it too. Like Kirk Herbstreit said, it was like, the ramifications of a Notre Dame loss are nothing compared to the ramifications of a Clemson loss.
The only way, win. Yeah, the only way it was a little dicey is that you got your ass kicked. If it was maybe much worse, then there'd be an outcry. But not that it was great, but so that was the only potential thing where if it was 70-7 or something, then there'd be a lot more conversation about it. But it was not. So
yeah. So I mean, but. Like you covered, I liked what you posted right after the playoffs were announced, because that 16 playoff looks a lot more fun than the 14 playoff.
Yeah, well, and this is what I've been talking about all season long. This is why we've been doing the Limp Ditka's top 6 all year, because I think a 16 playoff is where we should be, and it would have been perfect in a bizarre year where we're making up all the rules in 2020. Why not just for 1 year drop more teams in just as an experiment? So I'm kind of surprised they didn't do that, but it would have solved a lot of issues. I mean, there would still be arguments on who the 6th team was versus who the 4th team is now, but you at least in my mind, we would put the same top 4, and then we would add Texas A&M at number 5, and then I would add Cincinnati at number 6 as the last one to make the playoffs, where shit, I forgot who the committee put at number 6. If it's Florida or Georgia. No, I think it's Oklahoma, actually.
Oh, it's Oklahoma, right? Because they won the Big 12.
That's a joke, by the way. I mean, they've got 2 losses, and they put them ahead of Cincinnati, who's undefeated, which is
they won the Big 12 championship, right?
Well, that just proves the point that this should not be called the college football playoffs. This should be called the Power 5 Invitational, because if they're not going to let even in the top 6, not let an undefeated Cincinnati team in. I think they finished 7 or 8. They're never going to be in the top 4, let alone the top 6. So,
well, it also
it's not a playoff for anyone else but the Power 5 is what they've confirmed, but beyond a shadow of a doubt this year. So it's a joke, and the other 5 should start their own tournament if they want. It'd be they could get Fox or somebody to broadcast that as a rival tournament to play on January 2nd or whatever, however they want to do it. And
enough money there.
That's where you'd have, I mean, it wouldn't be the greatest, but instead of tonight, like UCF and BYU are playing, well, those guys would be playing in a tournament with Cincinnati or, whoever else. They can do a top 4 if they want or whatever they do. But
they could call the NIT.
Yeah, yeah. Well, but it would be bigger than that because
I
it's,
know.
these. No, I mean, you're right. It is the same as the NIT, but it would be. I think it could be huge because it would be teams that are in the top 25 in the country would be in it.
Yeah,
So,
that's true. That's true. You're right. You're right.
and they
It's
could,
not really like true leftovers. These are
right,
teams
right.
that are
Yeah,
legitimately competing throughout the season.
you're not talking about the 40 or 50th best team in the country like you would be in basketball. You'd be talking about, top 10, top 15 teams. So, another idea that I'd like to
Oh,
espouse, which I've
ooh,
been sitting on
surprise.
all year until this point, but if this is going to be just a Power 5 tournament, which it is, why don't we make it the same idea, 6 teams, but take the 5 conference champions and then one at large and make that your six teams there. So,
Seems pretty easy to me.
well, what that would do is, this past Saturday was Championship Saturday, which is normally one of my favorite weekends of the year. It was good. It was the games didn't really play out to be that much fun, but there's something cool about Championship Saturday in general. The SEC championship was awesome. I don't know if you watched much of that with Florida coming back at the end, but
Yeah, I thought, I went, holy shit,
it felt
what's
like they
gonna
had a chance.
happen?
But what that would do if you did that plan, if you made the conference championship games, essentially the championship Saturday would become the first round of the playoffs. You would have to win that game to make it into the final 6. So technically you would have a 10-team playoff, even though what I'm calling a 6-team playoff, it would be 10 teams. And then
Right.
that would get you down to 5, and then you'd have one at large, whether it's, independent Notre Dame going forward, or, that would still leave the door open a little bit for, a non-power 5 like Cincinnati to possibly jump into that at large bid. But I like the idea of making the champ, puts more emphasis again on championship weekend, more on the regular season. So technically
Right.
you'd be playing in your division of your conference all year to get a slot into the playoffs, which would be your championship game. Then if you win that championship game, then you go to the college football playoff. So there's something cool about that hierarchy, working your way up the ladder, playing the competition in your division versus your conference versus all of America. And I think there's some coolness there, because the main reason I don't want the playoff to go above 6 or 8, certainly not 16, is it ruins the excitement and fun of the regular season. Because if you let everybody in, you could lose a couple games and it's not a big deal, where the emphasis on winning every week is paramount in this. And we saw how it costs Texas A&M, it costs Oklahoma, it certainly costs Florida, where, if you let 16 teams in, who cares if Florida lost? Who cares
Right.
if Oklahoma loses 2 games? They would still get in. So I don't know. It's just, I always thought that'd be a cool way to do it. If we are going to basically just say this is the top 5, Power 5 Invitational, which it is, make those championship games the first round of the playoffs. Then no one can complain. People get everything they want. They get an expanded playoffs. They just have to think about it a little bit differently and just call it a 10-team playoff, but which in a reality ends up being a 6-team playoff. So that was
Yeah, I
my
guess.
idea.
Yeah,
I
I
wanted
guess.
to throw out there this week. I didn't want to mention it too early. I wanted to see how things played out this year, but that is my real platform, where I think could actually be a reality that everybody could get behind. I'm still amazed that the powers that be created a system. The powers that be, meaning the Power 5, they created a system that excludes one of their conferences every single year, at least one, and usually 2. The Pac-10 gets fucked every time, and the Big 12
Yep.
gets fucked routinely.
Yep.
So it's just amazing that that's a situation that has existed. There's no way it's going to exist after whenever the current TV contract runs out. I believe that might be several years down the road before that actually runs out, but we will have an expanded playoffs at that point. I'm hoping it's just 6 and not 8 or
Yeah.
something ridiculous like 16.
A question for Notre Dame too is,
Do you join a conference?
well, yeah, do we stay in the ACC?
I
mean,
think there's
the thing is right now, as of a contract they signed with the ACC a couple years ago, they play an ACC heavy schedule already.
right.
So, and the basketball team is in the ACC.
Yeah.
So, do they just does this marriage of convenience, as it's been called this year because of COVID, does it continue after this year as they are just a permanent part of the ACC, which to me would seem to make sense because the basketball program's there. But
I mean, for you as a Notre Dame fan all your life, like your schedule changed dramatically this year. You played all ACC teams, so you didn't get to play USC or Nate. Did you play Navy? I don't think you did.
No, we didn't play anyone like that.
So, what games did you really miss this year that you
Well, I
wish
think
you
what I
could have
miss,
seen?
what I miss is
Stanford?
which I don't know if this changes if you're in the ACC because you've always got what, 2 non-conference games to start the season, 3.
Yeah,
You get a couple non-conference games. What I
3.
miss is I always miss the Michigan Notre Dame matchup. Or
That
the
was being
State.
phased out anyway, though.
Well, that comes on and off the schedule.
Yeah. Well, so
There's some resentment towards Notre Dame because of how many times they were invited to be part of the Big Ten, and then
they refused and eventually joined the ACC. And this year, reluctantly had to. I'm just wondering.
I don't think they are, honestly.
Well, I think the only reason you would join the ACC is money and potentially an easier path to the college football playoff, which we've seen play out for you already this year. In that you lost a big game last week, but you still make it into the playoffs. So I think the advantages are huge for you guys to finally join.
Is it though?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I don't know that it is. The reason they're not joining is because that means they have to share the NBC TV revenue with the ACC.
Well, that's what they're balancing, though. Are you balancing that revenue versus an easier path into the playoff every year? That's the question for Notre Dame going forward.
Yeah, but I don't know that their schedule would have been, like I said, their schedule is probably not terribly different. As an independent with having to play the 5 ACC games, right? You could still have had Clemson on the schedule. They did the year before. And then they don't play the conference game. So then you have this whole idea that they just would have stayed not that this makes that much of a world of difference, but they would have just stayed number 2 in the country.
Oh, not playing in the championship game.
Yeah. Not playing the championship week.
But you wouldn't be playing Vanderbilt or, whoever else. So I don't know. I guess I'm just posing the question. Just that's what's out there is I think it's an easier path to get to, because you have to have a lot of things work out right for you to get that 4th slot. You have to obviously have the record, but then you also have to have, only 3 of the 5 conferences be better than you. You have to fight all 5 of the conferences. So
that's a totally valid point, but this is going to be the 3rd year they're in the playoffs since this.
You made it two without being in the ACC.
Yeah, without being in the ACC. So
that's interesting. Well, it's something to look at going forward, because it's all about the money, whether you're going to join or not. So, and I understand not wanting to share that NBC money, but there's also,
that's why the Big Ten's been shunned, is because of the NBC money.
This happened 30 years ago. This is before the NBC money. That's what I was referencing earlier. That may or may not have been cut off. But
that 30 years ago. Okay, I understand that, but that's just like
that's an arrogance.
That's an arrogant historic thing there.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So.
We'll get maybe sometime in the off season I'll get into my full story about that. We should get into the history of that and my history with that and your history of being a Notre Dame fan, or maybe you already got into that, but I can get more into my hatred for Notre Dame that I've not talked much about on this podcast through 10 episodes so far, but that's the beginning of it, and I can get deeper into it. But we've talked plenty of college right now or so far. Did you want to jump into the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, in the shit show of the NFC East, the Cowboys are back in the hunt.
They're back.
They are 2nd place team in the division after 2 straight victories. And while the path to the playoffs is requires two of the Washington football team losses, they need two losses. The chances of them losing twice are more possible. Probably seem less, or probably seem more possible than because the Cowboys have a better chance of winning two games because they got to play the Eagles and the Giants.
Those are winnable.
Washington has to play the Ravens this week. Good luck on that one.
Yeah.
And then they close out against Philly, which we all know the NFC, any conference game to close the season, no matter where you're at position wise, you like to kind of stick it to the team, especially if they're ahead. So
well, and who's Washington's quarterback right now anyway? Like they had
Alex Smith is probably still out this week.
Dwayne Haskins may have been removed from the team because he was caught out partying without a mask on social media, and has since deleted his Twitter account today. And I'm not sure where that stands as of right now tonight, but there's some question if they even have a quarterback right now. I don't even know who their third string or who would be next. So there's some interesting things going on with the Washington football team and the NFC East. I think so if you win both games, you would end up 7-9 as a division winner. Is that how it played?
That would be no.
You're 5-9 right now.
7-9 as a division winner. I mean, it's pretty respectable. I'm pretty proud of the team. On this, this I don't know if this falls under. This is something I've never personally seen before. I'm sure it's happened, but during the Cowboys game against the 49ers, the 49ers took the field goal and set up for the onside kick to score the tying touchdown. They kicked the onside kick and it bounced up in the air, but it bounced up in a really clean spot to where CeeDee Lamb, who is one of the fastest dudes in football, like shot out of a fucking cannon and scored a touchdown on it.
It's like he drew it up that way. I mean,
I'd never seen I never saw an onside kick go for a touchdown. I'm sure it's happened before, but I've just never personally seen it. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, you couldn't have drawn it up any better for CeeDee Lamb just to run that back. It was hilarious.
It was almost like everyone in San Francisco was like, what just happened? Like, they were all standing there like he was supposed to just fall to the ground and then just took off running because there was like a clear lane.
Yeah, it's all right in front of him.
Yeah, so that was a fun little win.
Well, it's funny because you guys moved to 5-9 and to equal the Lions 5-9 record. I didn't somehow through this whole time I haven't been paying attention to records too much because I just want the Lions to lose. But yeah, I didn't realize we had been ahead of you in the standings, in the NFC standings at least. But we are not ahead of you in the draft rankings.
You're not?
No, we're tied. I don't know how the tiebreakers work. We can get into that maybe next week or next episode. But yeah, somehow there's like 4 teams that are 5-9, and you would be drafting 8 overall, and we'd be drafting 11th overall.
Ooh.
What's funny for talk about draft order for a minute, the shit you couldn't make up for the week would be the New York Jets screwed themselves out of the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes by beating the Rams, who's a decent team. So that was shocking. They could
see that coming.
Yeah, so just hilarious that they would fuck themselves this late into the season and not getting a chance at Trevor Lawrence, as the Jaguars have moved into the first slot overall. And I think the Jaguars play the Bears this weekend, and they have a pretty difficult final opponent in the last week. So Jaguars pretty much have locked up Trevor Lawrence. So hilarious. Only the Jets could do that. But I do need to, unless you have more about your Cowboys.
No, I'm just getting excited for this week's big matchup against the Eagles.
Oh God. Yeah, Carson Wentz has like demanded a trade or something now.
He's not a starter anymore, so because he sucks. But
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one, man. The NFC least, you called it early in the year, but wow. I do need to talk about my Lions just because this podcast has four main interests. And I haven't talked about my Michigan State Spartans at all because they didn't even play, and there's not much to talk about. Not much to talk about on the field with the Lions. They got crushed by the Titans this weekend. The only thing on the field that was of note was probably our fifth or sixth string cornerback, Alex Myers, kind of made headlines because he was completely destroyed by a stiff arm by Derrick Henry. I'm not sure if you saw that highlight, but it was one of the most devastating stiff arms. Just he made him look like a child, just throwing him on the ground. It was to the point where somebody changed his Wikipedia page like moments after. I was listening to Detroit radio when I was out for a walk, not watching the game, but they had seen that it was already updated to say Alex Myers, cornerback for the Detroit Lions, born April 20th, 1996, died December 20th, 2020, is currently buried at the 17-yard line of Nissan Stadium in Nashville, Tennessee.
That's awesome.
It was so great. So at least I get some laughter from my Lions because they provide very, very little else to be entertaining. The only other thing that was entertaining about that game is it was revealed on Monday morning that the Lions ran a fake punt at one point in the game, and it seemed like kind of a good idea that they were down 14, I think, and it was I believe it was the fourth quarter, but they ran a fake punt. It didn't work. It was like a long, I don't know, I forget how many yards they needed to gain. I think they came 1 or 2 yards short on the fake, so it almost worked. But the question is, if it had worked, would we have ever found out that call was not made by head coach Darrell Bevell? That call was made by special teams coach Braden Coombs. And
he just decided to call it without checking with the interim head coach.
Indeed, he did. And for that,
balls.
He was immediately fired Monday morning.
Well, that's what he deserves. Yeah.
So the Lions had a special teams coach go rogue on their head coach and just called a fake punt because he could. Like, I don't know how the logistics of how Lions plays are called, but how does the special team coach override a call by the head coach and get the special teams to run a fake when the head coach did not want that to happen?
Hey, boys, huddle up over here. Don't tell the big guy over there we're going to do the fake punt now. So whatever he says, just do the fake punt.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I don't know if that's insubordination just on the coach or the whole team. It's just hilarious. Like, only the Lions could have that kind of situation arise and have it be exposed. It's possible that shit happens all the time, but I've never heard of a coach going rogue. And actually having a play run that the head coach did not want to have happen, but that happened, and the reason came out very quickly. Unfortunately for the Lions, that Braden Coombs was kind of a hotshot name, young coaching name that you heard around the league might be a potential head coach down the road. And not that I think he's in his 30s or something. Not that necessarily the Lions would be, they are looking for a head coach. Not that they'd be looking for somebody like that this soon, but down the road. But maybe they had somebody in the pipeline that could be the next big thing. But somehow he had no respect for anything to do with the organization and just went rogue and was fine. He probably wanted to get fired. Is another theory that's out there that
maybe.
I mean, you have to think there'd be some kind of repercussions if you just run your own fucking play. So it's hard to say.
Maybe if it worked, that was his audition for head coach.
Yeah, well, it was a good. If they had made the first down, that's the question. We'll never know.
We'll never know if they make the first down. Maybe Bevel's out and
yeah. Well, Bevel's out one way or the other, but yeah, maybe this would have never have come to light. So. At least if the Lions are going to be as pathetic as they always are, at least they're entertaining in new and interesting ways that I could never have guessed would be a news story coming out this week. That unreal. So that's all I've got on my Lions and pro football as we get to the last 2 weeks of the season. It's cool that your Cowboys at least are in a kind of a ridiculous playoff hunt, but you're
They
still
sure
in the hunt,
are.
so you're making it interesting. I hope you guys win, so it moves the Lions up the draft board a little bit. So
Yeah.
we have a common interest now.
All right. Go Cowboys.
Yeah. So yeah, unless
Say it out loud, Smitty.
no,
Yeah.
that won't
Come on.
happen. We'll
Come on,
see
Smitty.
if we can move up like 4 or 5 spots in the draft, then maybe you'll get me there, but not just 1 or 2. So we'll get there. We'll see.
All right, Smitty.
So unless you've got anything else for this week,
I do not.
I think I want to wish everybody a happy holidays. We are broadcasting on Festivus Eve right now, so happy Festivus, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to everybody. We haven't talked about, we may or may not have a new episode between Christmas and New Year's. We might wait till after the New Year. Who knows? Be on the lookout. You guys can be on the lookout for that on our social media pages at Limp Ditkas on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We've got our YouTube channel, which may or may not be working right now. We'll see after we're done with this.
Another 15 minutes in, so
yeah. Well, we'll see if this podcast actually gets out. But if this does get out, the podcast is on every podcast platform that you would like to find a podcast on. You can find all those through limptitkas.com. Yes, we are part of the Wordhole Media Network, as you see behind Pete, or may not be able to see behind Pete.
No, I think you got it. You got that.
That is part of, in concert with our baseball podcast, which we need to do a baseball podcast maybe next week. There's some things going on with your White Sox.
No, they just keep getting richer, but
Yeah, so you can check that out. Be on the lookout for a new podcast there and some stuff on social media at MajorLeagueAholes.com. So yeah, I think that's about it. I'm going to call this Dagger Time. We out. Peace.
Peace.